Part of the reason that we're doing this together is because our styles are just a tiny bit different, and I think that that's important. One thing to understand about training is it's not a one-trick pony. Maybe you guys have hired trainers in the past and it hasn't worked. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good trainers. It just means that maybe that method did not work for your dog in their reactivity. So it is important to have different opinions and different styles when you're training and be okay with that. So
every trainer, the methods that they're using and the goals they're setting for your dog and the techniques that they're using, it's all the stuff that they've used in the past or they've seen used in the past from someone else, and it's worked. So it's not like you can't just read a textbook and it'll tell you exactly what to do for each behavior for each dog. Every trainer is just utilizing the skills that they've learned over the years and seen results from their dogs or learned from a mentor, or seminars like this. We go to seminars like this to learn from other trainers so that we can figure out new techniques. My own techniques that I'm using for my dogs are constantly changing and evolving. I'm not just stuck on one technique. When I learn about new stuff, I'm seeing if I can implement that into dogs that I'm working with, families that I'm working with, and seeing how those results happen. And if they're good and I like them, then I'm going to start introducing those to more and more clients. So there's not wrong answers and there's not right answers from trainers. It's just what they've seen work and what they haven't seen work. So if you get trainers that tell you can't do it one way and you have to do it another way, they're probably just trying to make some money off you.
all right, so we're going to get going into this a little bit. One of the main keys about this is, as a trainer, we hear the word aggression so much, right? So there's a difference between reactivity and there's a difference between aggression, right? Reactivity is defined, it's the state of being reactive, and reactive is defined as showing a response to a stimuli. That is why we are all here. Your dogs are showing some sort of a response to a stimuli, or you want to learn about that. You want to go into aggression?
Yeah, so just to build off that with reactivity, reactivity isn't just, it's not a bad thing. It just means your dog is reacting to anything that's going on. Your dog could just be whining because they want something, and technically it can be reactivity. Depending, if you're walking your dog down the street, they might not be lunging for another dog or freaking out on the leash, but they're sitting there, they're following with their head, they're whining because they want to get to that dog for whatever reason. That's still reactivity. They might not be visually going crazy like we think about when we hear the word, but just that little whine is enough. That's considered reactivity, so we need to dial that behavior back. When we start getting into aggression, that's when we're seeing a dog that really wants to get to the other dog in a negative way. And now let me change that. You might not even see that that dog is going to react aggressively towards another dog. The simple way that I put it to my clients and who I want to speak to is an aggressive dog versus a reactive dog. That aggressive dog has an intent to injure whatever they are reacting to. So it could be you, it could be other people, it could be other dogs, it could be other animals. It's the intent to injure. A reactive dog who's reactive towards other dogs may lunge at that dog. They may air snap at that dog where they're biting the air right in front of another dog. But they're trying to get space. They're not trying to get towards the other dog. They're trying to tell the other dog or the person that they're trying to speak to like another dog that they want space. Okay, the aggressive dog, rather than trying to create space, is going to close that space and it's going to go after that other dog to cause injury.
And another thing on that note is all of our dogs are on leash when they're being reactive, right? So dogs have two responses, fight or flight. And we just took both of those responses away by putting them on a leash. So therefore, they are reacting because whatever their stimuli is and their trigger, which we're going to get into next, this is how they're reacting. Like he said, right? One's going towards, one's trying to get away. And sometimes you just don't know. And we're going to try to help you guys identify a little bit about that today. But once you put that dog on a leash, you've lost all ability to let him do his natural thing, which is fight or flight, because now we have them on leash. Does that make sense? Okay. So understanding what your dog's trigger is, it's obviously huge. Stimuli, trigger. I always use the word trigger. What is your dog reacting to? Okay. I think dog's always the number one trigger on a leash for sure. I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep going. And then,
And just to go a little bit deeper into the triggers is just because it's another dog doesn't mean you have all the answers to that trigger. You could go a lot deeper, and it could be a certain size dog, it could be a certain color dog, it could be a certain gender dog, it could be a dog that they can visibly see that the other dog is injured or walking a certain way, and that could be a trigger to that dog. Common ones that I see are white dogs and black dogs. So black dogs, they don't see that dog. That dog blends into the background, right? So that dog is just immediately just pops right in front of their face. It could be over there and just going to slowly get to them. It just pops right in front of their face. And so they weren't expecting that dog. A white colored dog is going to pop on the background. So they can see that dog from really, really far away, possibly before you even notice that your dog has seen another dog. And that dog is going to slowly get to them. And they're freaking out. If you're out on the street and you see, at night, there's no one around and there's a person, they just start walking towards you. That's what's going on in that dog's mind, is they're seeing this white dog that is just, it's not getting closer, it's just there. So I see white dogs and black dogs are a big cause of reactivity, and that as a trigger. Just because it's another dog, you need to then go deeper into it and figure out what it is about that other dog to get you on the track that you need to be on.
yeah, I mean, I've broken it down to as far as fluffy tails with a client. It only reacted to dogs with fluffy tails. Like it can literally be that specific, guys. So that's a big one. Color, obviously, and mine is same sex.
Yeah.
Sex is always a big trigger in dogs as well.
Usually female on female.
100%. It's like the real world. So guys get over it, and then they're done, and then the girls are just still mad at each other forever. So but it's always going to be female for sure if you're going to see the issue. But I mean, we have kids, we have scooters. We had one dog at the shelter that hated trash cans. So Tuesday's trash day. It was terrible. Right. So you just never know, but identifying that trigger and then even breaking it down further. Okay. Cause I even saw that in some of the comments here. Some dogs, not all dogs, some children, not all children, taking an account with how they see. You guys know the kids show Bluey? Okay. Go put it on for your dog. It's actually done in colors that your dog can see. Those are the shades that dogs see in. I put it on for my dogs all the time. And my foster dog actually sits there and turns the TV, and my dumb dog doesn't sleep through it. So that's the colors they see. There's actually a filter, a dog filter of how they see. So you can go to the pet store and pick out toys to see how they see. So it's really a big thing because we don't realize how muted the colors are. Okay, so it's something interesting to figure out. And then once you find, you're like, wow, that dog had white with black spots. Maybe John is making a good point. The next dog, is a spotted shepherd or something. No reaction. So it is important to really kind of take those mental notes when you're walking. I make my clients say, is that a male or a female when they're walking? You need to know. You have to know. And I honestly say about 95% of my reactive dogs that I see on the side and at the shelter are actually dog friendly. I call them social morons, and they just don't know how to act. They don't know how to approach on the leash. They don't know what they're doing. So that's a big thing too.
Yeah, especially with shelter dogs, rescue dogs, we don't know how they grew up. So that first 4 months of their life is their imprinting stage, and whatever happens during that time is now going to stick with them for the rest of their life. So if it was a certain dog that maybe went after them when they were a little puppy, that's the kind of dog that they are now going to be afraid of for the rest of their life. It's why whenever we work with puppy clients, we are getting them out into the world as much as possible. They need to be exposed to as much things as possible, because that one thing that you weren't able to expose them to can then lead to the reactivity later in life.
So we're going to talk about the doggy vortex a little bit later on in the training. So just the definition of the doggy. What did you call it? I
just call it when the dog gets locked on to whatever's.
And I call it the doggy vortex. So when your dog is doing this and they're reacting, we're going to talk about this later. I call it the doggy vortex because they're staring at their stimuli and they're going, I want to play, or threat, whatever they're thinking, but they spin. right? They're going in a circle and they're spinning out of control. You've probably been in that situation and there's nothing you could do. I could have a whole hot dog and wave it in front of that dog. He's not going to stop, okay? Because they've gotten to that point. So I call it the doggy vortex, locked in, whatever you want to call it, because they get so far off. So when I say that term, I just want you guys to understand what we're talking about in that aspect.
And that learning window, when they're out of the learning window, is when they're in that vortex, when they've locked on whatever their trigger is. And we know that they're out of that learning phase because they're not taking treats. They're not responding to any of the motivation, the reinforcement that we're trying to give them. They're not reacting to it. And so that's when we're in the management phase, that we just need to break that vortex. We need to get them away from their trigger and reset them so that we can look at the trigger and we can positively expose them to it.
And we're going to get into that. I know we might be jumping ahead just a tiny bit here. Okay. Now, also, one thing to always think about is, should I see a vet? Okay. You never know if there's something wrong. Whenever I talking to somebody on the phone or trying to figure out what's going on with a dog, I get that it just came out of nowhere. It just came out of nowhere. So that's a really important question to stop and think and ask yourself. Is there an injury I'm unaware of?
Eyes, ears, diabetes, slip discs, any kind of stuff with the spine is going to be really hard for you guys to notice, for anyone to notice. So if reactivity just kind of pops up out of the blue and suddenly one day you wake up and your dog is acting totally different to whatever's going on around them, that's when we want to make sure that we can rule out any kind of injury. It's always the very first step. Whenever new clients call me, I ask them when's the last time they've been to the vet. Have they had blood work done? Have you guys talked about what's going on with your dog's body? We want to make sure we can rule that out before we start trying to work on any kind of actual training methods, because it could be as simple as there's a pinched nerve somewhere on their body and they're just in fear mode of getting injured by someone else.
Because they can't protect themselves. Mine is, I sometimes when that happens, ask for a thyroid panel. If I say, hey, has your dog gained a lot of weight recently? Yes, you need to get a thyroid panel done. One tiny little pill that costs nothing, get that thyroid regulated, and sometimes it literally will eliminate it. So that's hyper, right? When they thyroid can cause just out of nowhere aggression as well. So what we're just trying to prove is that sometimes everyone's like, I'm a terrible dog owner, it's my fault I did this. No, sometimes you do have to take some other little things into consideration before you start to worry and go crazy. And it could be medical. You just never know. You guys know your dog and you would know, this just came out of nowhere. Maybe I should go to the vet. Okay? But just don't discard that for sure. Okay. Training basics. Okay, now we're going to get into the training basics. So, number one thing, and I can't stress this enough, it's the relationship with your dog. Okay? If you are in your house with your dog and you can't tell your dog to come 100% of the time and it's not going to come, you can't expect your dog to behave in a high stimuli situation. Okay? So it's really important to have that base relationship at home with your dog. I'm not one of the trainers that says you can't let your dogs on the couch. My couches are destroyed. You should see them. The dogs can't come in your bed. I'm okay with all of that. That's not the kind of relationship I'm talking about. I'm talking about, does your dog mind you? Does your dog understand that you control their resources, that you give them their food, that they listen to you? Okay, that you have that nice relationship.
You have to be able to communicate with your dog. That communication is the number one thing that all training leads back to. So that bond you have with your dog, it's about, can I communicate effectively with my dog in whatever kind of environment and situation is going on? We need to train for that. So your dog can listen to you in an empty room with nothing going on, awesome. But now we get to a higher stress situation, we're out, and there's another dog that's made our dog freak out. Have I ever worked on anything with the dog in that kind of situation where there's a lot of stuff going on? If I haven't, then I can't expect that dog to listen to anything that I say because we've never worked it. Even with just basic stuff, if I have a dog that's not even reactive, but I take them to a festival or a park with lots of stuff going on, if I've never worked with that dog, they're not going to listen to my sit. So you have to be able to communicate with your dog that you're in charge and that you're there to keep them safe. Most of the time with the reactivity, it's fear-based. So we need our dog to understand that when we step in, we're keeping them safe, so that they're able to shut off that reaction that they're having and trust us to handle a situation. So it all, communication, the bond, it's all that stuff wrapped in one. We need to be a leader for our dogs, and we need to take care of them and help them understand and navigate the world that they're not used to.
Okay. Oh, this is the, okay. So management versus learning. We touched on that a little bit earlier. A lot of people obviously are like, I want to fix this. I want it to happen. I want this immediately, right? Yeah. So there is obviously a learning window that we have to teach the dog. And then we come to a management level as well. So understanding that difference is important when you are training your dog.
Yeah, the management it's the very first step before we can get to any actual training. If we can't control the environment that the dog is reacting in, then we can't really expect anything to get better, because they're not able to get into that learning window that we need them into to be able to actually positively expose them to what's going on, work on our commands with stuff's going on, help the dog be comfortable with what's going on around them. So if I have a dog that has gotten too close to another dog, okay, and they freak out, I can't teach them anything. We're out of that learning window, we're in that vortex, and we need to use management just to bring them back to us and kind of reset the dog. When we're at home and we're dealing with things like doors and windows that they're reacting to, well, our very first step is we need to cut off access to that stimuli that is causing all of the reaction. If I have a dog that's barking out the window at everyone that goes by, okay, well, my very first step is, can we block off that window? Don't give the dog access to that window, because every single time that a person walks by and our dog barks at them and that person leaves, well,
they won.
They got what they wanted out of it. So it's all practicing. Think about how many times your dog has barked at someone outside the window. Every single one of those times is, an hour in the gym shooting hoops, right? Where they're practicing over and over, and every single time they're getting the reaction, the outcome that they want. Okay, so now we have to start by just cutting off access to that to get them into a space where we can actually teach them how to handle that situation, and not just give them more practice to get better at yelling at people to go away. So that management, understanding that management and actually learning and teaching your dog something are two different things. They work together, but they're still two different steps. So don't expect to just immediately start making things better. We have to first cut off what's they're reacting to, and controlling that environment. I have to be able to simulate some of these issues. If it's sound, I can control the sound. I can bring them into an empty room and I can play YouTube videos at low volume, and I can see how loud that has to go before they're going to start freaking out. And so I can start positively exposing them to it at a low volume, and we can work up to when, that Amazon truck is backing up in front of the house, that school bus is opening the doors, the garbage truck's going by. We have to be able to control that. If we can't control it and we can't, stop it from happening around them, then we're not going to be able to hit on every time it happens. And so our consistency is down. And so it's going to take a lot longer. We're only going to be able to do so much if we're only able to hit a dog that's barking, 1 out of 3 times. And those other 2 times, they're able to just bark and bark and bark and bark, and we can't control it.
And on that note, think about it. You guys are barking and barking and barking at your dog, right? You're sitting there going, leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it. Because that's what Emily told me to say. And they're still reacting. So you're inadvertently reinforcing them, because they're like, yay, she told me I did good.
Yeah, you yelling at your dog is you barking back. And
that's right. So you just had a conversation with them, and they don't know what you said. They don't speak English. So you inadvertently reinforced it. Dogs don't care what kind of attention it is. They just want attention. So, even if you're using your angry voice, you still just inadvertently reinforced that behavior because you had a conversation with them about it.
Or if you're out walking and they react to something on a leash, and you stop walking and you stay still and you start petting your dog, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. All you did was reinforce
that anxiety, that fear, whatever it is. Yeah. You got it. Yeah. Got to get this.
We can switch back.
No, it's okay. I'm good. Okay.
It's reinforcement.
Yep. Okay. So every dog has different motivation, right? I mean, not all dogs love treats, but it is awesome when your dog loves treats because it really, really helps.
Makes it easier.
It does. It really does. But understand that there's a difference between a cookie and a hot dog. Okay. So when we're training dogs, you do sometimes have to introduce what we call high value treats during these times. Okay. So that's treats. I might not go out there and a pepperoni or a piece of jerky isn't enough to not make them lunge at that child. I might need a slice of Velveeta. The slice of the Velveeta singles and hot dogs are my go-tos, by the way. Yeah. You have to make it more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Your reinforcement has to be
Higher.
More important to your dog, higher value to your dog than the distraction that's going on.
Thank you. That's my words were jumbled. I appreciate it.
And I break it down even further. When I'm teaching people how to understand the treat hierarchy, I'm like, okay, when you're at home, empty room, cool, we can use their kibble.
Absolutely.
Right? Then we go up to the dry treats. Then we can go up to wet treats. Then I go up to the hot dog. Hot dogs are my it's just standard. Right?
Yeah, it's standard.
Hot dogs, cheese, stuff like that. Or we could go up to maybe some higher value meat. When we get to the really, really, really high stuff where this is what I'll use if we're doing emergency recalls or for working dogs off leash, stuff like that. You can use the fresh fat right off a steak, right off your stovetop, right? So we just always have to remember, whatever we're trying to reinforce, motivate our dog with, just has to be more important to that dog than what's going on around them, what's distracting them, okay?
I always say I'm not going to work for Weight Watchers candy, but give me a Reese's and I'll do it, right? So kind of think of it that way. And again, John uses the squeaker a lot as a distraction.
Yeah, it's a way to just I have the squeaker out of your toy. I keep one with me all the time. So if I notice my dog's starting to get into that zone where they're watching something, I have that squeaker right in my pocket, right in my bag. I can squeak that, and they can focus back on me. It breaks that vortex, right? So the same way that if we can get them to go behind a car, go behind a tree, and they can no longer see it, it's the same way. If I can use that squeaker to get them from looking at that other dog to focus back on me, I've broken it, and we can kind of restart.
So that's a great alternative if your dog doesn't like hot dogs, if your dog's a vegetarian. Some dogs just need toys. Some dogs need the tactile. Some are vocal, and some are scent. I mean, now we're starting to get into some of our higher, you got a serious working dog at home.
Yeah, I've worked with a dog where treats didn't matter to them. Toys didn't matter to them. Tugging didn't matter. Touching them, all the niceties I can say to them, none of it mattered. So what we did is we had, you can get like a paint stirrer from Home Depot or one of those wooden posts, and we take coyote urine, fox urine, stuff like that, and we use that as a lure as their reward, and I can move their head around just by having them follow the scent, and I can give them time to smell all these different things, and that's their reward. So some dogs, But
that's enough for them. They got to smell that. Yeah. We've all had those hounds or those super, like their nose to the ground, and it works.
If you have a working line scent dog,
check off 1, check off 2, check off 3, check off 4, and we're at 5. They don't necessarily want to work for a pepperoni anymore. So just know that there are options, because a lot of people feel defeated because my dog won't take a treat. My dog, there are other options out there.
And remember, with those treats, if your dog isn't taking that treat, they like the treats, but in that instance, they're not taking the treat. They've left that learning window. So now we got to go back to the management, get them out, and then those treats will work again. Okay. Move on.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to say something.
Okay. So now everything we've talked about works for reactivity, period. So now we're going to specifically talk about leash reactivity. And then we're also going to talk about door as well, because those are obviously the two biggest ones, right? Obviously, leash reactivity is caused for various reasons. The main two are fear and frustration, like I said. We put dogs on leashes and we take away their ability to fight and flight. So the fear and the frustration, like I said, I would say 95% of the dogs that I train this on end up being dog friendly. They don't know how to act. And because they act like this, maybe the owners are like, oh, you are never meeting a dog, right? Or it's just straight up excitement. Okay. And then the fear end of it is,
which is what I see the most of, is lots and lots of fear. They're They don't want to hurt this dog. Even in that video that we showed with the dog showing their teeth and all that, I don't know that dog, but I can tell you that dog is probably not trying to hurt the other dog. They're just trying to get the space. And so it looks like the dog is trying to get to the other dog and eat its face off. But in reality, it's just saying, hey, you're too close to me. I don't know what you're going to do. I need some more space. So even if that dog is stepping forward, lunging forward with that reactivity, you still don't know that it's aggression. Chances are it's just they want space. They're telling the dog, give me space, give me space, give me space. We talked about this, a bunch before. We're just testing different stuff, right? We don't, just because it's a dog doesn't mean that it's going to be every dog, doesn't mean that it's going to be every situation where they see another dog. It could just be where they're located, and there's another dog that they're gonna react to that dog, but we put them in another room, in another area, they're not going to react to that same dog. It's a lot of trial and error and just trying to figure out what it is that's causing this. Our dogs can't just tell us. It's like a kid. I'm afraid of people that are taller than me. We don't have any way of understanding that from our dog without taking note of what happens when we're out and about.
Process of elimination.
Yeah. So we can break down the triggers to so much stuff.
Dogs feed off of energy, and I've even had dogs, I always say they were, my apologies if anybody has a doodle here, but they react a lot to the long leash doodles that are like, hey, and right, versus the tight shepherd that's right here. If you ever see me at Swift Cantrell, I always say, don't approach, because I usually have a reactive dog that I'm working, because I get all those dogs on that circle, right? So I'm sure you guys have all seen that guy with that nice tight shepherd who just runs, that dog is right there. I have never had a leash reactive dog react to that shepherd. It's part of the reason I go there, because that shepherd is so balanced and so well trained. He isn't even looking at our dog. He could care less. But you get that, dog all the way at the end of the 6-foot leash. It's usually a do-do-do dog. It's like, hey, friend, what do you do? But it's not under control. That can trigger fear in some dogs and make them super duper uncomfortable. So sometimes you might just say, oh, it's the do-do-do dogs that set off my dog. So it can even be the energy.
And that same off balance of the doodle is also why so many dogs will react to toddlers. They're most likely to get bit because they go up to the dog, and they're not just walking up to the dog nicely.
I call them drunk midgets.
They're going side to side, hands are all over the place.
They're all over.
And into a dog, dogs don't like unbalanced weight. Okay, you're never going to see other dogs in the we're talking wild animals and stuff. We're never going to see them off balance, right? So the only time that an animal is going to see another animal off balance like that is if something's wrong with them, rabies, stuff like that. So it's ingrained into the dog's head where if something's approaching me like this, something's wrong with it, and I need to be afraid. Yeah, all the unbalanced stuff, certain dog breeds, kids, if off balance, this is one of the major ones that we see a lot, and that's where a lot of the bites happen is the toddler that runs up to the kid, and the dog is like, get away from me, and they're just lunging out. Okay?
So while you guys all take this information at home, you really have to take literally all of this, sex, all of that, color of the dog, size of the dog, all of that into consideration. When we adjust that to people, it is literally the same thing, right? I have a dog in my class right now who doesn't like females. That's very rare. So we have to become friends. 9 times out of 10, it's that dogs don't like men. So you have to look into that as well. Hats and glasses, especially sunglasses, they're gonna react. They can't see the eyes. It freaks them out. That's how they
can't see the muscles in our face the same way with black dogs and darker skinned people. The dog cannot see
the structure, our reaction almost.
And so they're going to be more likely to react to that.
Yeah. So you have to take all of that into consideration as well.
And again, with so much of us having the shelter dogs, we don't know what happened to them when they were a puppy and what kind of set off some of these triggers. So we really have to, that trial and error is really, really important.
Okay, so now you got your dog out and you're like, okay, it's definitely I have a female dog. It's definitely female dogs. Okay, we'll just say that's it. We're just going to say that's it right now. So now you have to work what we call the threshold for the dog. Okay, so the reactivity threshold is different for every dog immediately. I have had dogs that will react from 60 feet away, and we got to start to work there, right? And then I don't have dogs that, they just react 20 feet. So you have to find where you're learning versus management, where that threshold is of your dog's tolerance to be able to still learn. And when you find that area, then that's when you have to start breaking ground. And this is really, we're going to work it. We're within that 20-foot window, we're going to get to 10. And that's what we have to really push. Break out the high value treats and work. A lot of redirecting, a lot of squeaking, some leave it. We got a whole bunch of things going on there. But until you know what that distance is, you're just going to be willy-nillying it out there. So to understand, okay, you're going to eye it, right, every time. It's always 20 feet. That's huge to know. It is the second, it doesn't matter, it's the second they spot that dog. It is 60 feet. Then you got to start working at 60 feet. The hardest part for all these dogs is once you get within 10 feet, regardless, because they were reactive for a reason. So that's when we really got to push them once they're in that small window of 10 feet. But when you, I don't have my notes, sorry. So we now have the trigger, we're going to do that. So how am I going to handle it? Am I going to handle it with a leave it? Am I going to handle it with a squeaker? Am I going to handle it with a leash correction? Am I going to turn around and go the other direction and keep bringing them back into that window? But until you know that space, you don't know anything, just as much as you don't know the trigger. Does that make sense? Okay.
And we have to also remember is that threshold to that trigger is going to be different for every single one. So my dog could be reactive to dogs and it could be reactive to people, but they can get a lot closer to a dog than they can get to a person. So when we're working on these different triggers to kind of expel them out of our dog's language, we're going to have to work them totally differently on separate times. I'm not going to, if my dog is reactive to people and dogs, and I know those thresholds are different, I can't work that at the same time because the dog could be, I don't know what the dog is reacting to. So we just have to be aware of that. And so we kind of break down all our dog's triggers and we work them separately. And when we're working these thresholds, I'm getting my dog, like Emily said, we're getting them right up to that threshold line. Okay, well, I know if they step over that one little inch, they're going to react. And so I'm getting them right up to that. I'm letting them see the trigger, and then I want them to check back in with me, and then they get rewarded. We don't want to try and teach our dog to never look at the other dog. Okay, we want them to look at the other dog and then not react.
Respond appropriately.
They don't need to go and be best friends with that dog. We're training for neutral. So I want our dogs to just live their life. We don't have to take a dog that hates other dogs and turn them into a dog that wants to go wrestle with everybody. We just want them to be able to go through life without any kind of fear or frustration. That check-in is key. When we're working on management and we need to get them out of a situation, then we can just lure them away and then we can kind of restart. But we really want them to see the trigger and then come back to us and say, I saw it, I understand that you're going to keep me safe and we're good to go. And so then we're just going to keep inching up. We may have to stay at a threshold line for a month. You know, all dogs are different. So I get asked all the time, how long is this going to take until my dog is good again? I'm like, I really don't know. We need to start working and we're going to see how close we can get first. And then we're going to see how well they can advance. But that's kind of how we treat that threshold. It's just we're going to get them right before they react and we're going to add that positive exposure so they can see the stuff that normally sets them off. But then we add that positive in and so they can start seeing that stimuli as a good thing and not a thing to be afraid of. They don't have to love it. We just don't want them to be afraid of it and have their life kind of ruined or kept in a tight space. We want our dogs to be able to enjoy everything that they want to.
I think a really important thing you said is we want them to look at the trigger. The key is for them to look at the trigger and not react.
Yeah.
And what we tend to do when we have reactive dogs, it's just like, let's fence the yard and keep them at home because it's just easier. And I totally get that. but it's they need to face it head on, and they need to learn how to react appropriately. And we do this with the positive reinforcement, and it's that, like he said, the check-in. Some dogs need help with that check-in, and that's where the squeaker comes in, and that's where the leave it comes in, and this is where
And the basic obedience.
Right. You could say, look, I mean, it's that simple, but that trying to find that threshold, and then you're reinforcing that. And like you said, you're slowly inching closer and closer and closer to the trigger. Yeah, I've had dogs that I've worked with for a year, and I've had dogs that got it in 2 weeks and the clients were fine. So it isn't, there is no timeline for your dog. So don't feel like I've been doing this for 3 months and I'm a failure. You're not, okay? It's every dog is different in how they react and how long they're going to react and how it's been handled. And
a lot of that comes down to how often we're working it and how much we're able to control that environment. Like I was talking about before, if I am having to work it every time I take my dog out, if I miss one of those times when we're out on a walk, well, it's going to take that much longer than if I'm able to catch it every single time. We're able to treat every walk as a training scenario rather than just getting my dog out to get some exercise and get out of the house.
So we kind of talked about it a little bit, but like how to work leave it, right? I mean, the goal is, when I work leave it, my major goal is to change the behavior. That is the goal. They look at the trigger, I say leave it, they look at me, and the behavior should eventually change. And again, this isn't a true, non-aggressive dog. This is that, I still want to play, I go to daycare, but I'm going to kill my neighbor's dog on leash. That dog, okay? So when you're working leave it, it's important to, timing is everything, okay? They look, you get them back to you. It's no different than focus, squeak, you reward. What he's saying is check in. I add a word to help the dogs. He might add the squeak to help the dogs. Whatever you need, sometimes they're going to need that assistance to show them how to apply what we're doing. They don't know. We're going to show them. If you got that 60-foot dog, you're going to have to help him. The second he sees that dog, look, leave it, boom, reward, turn around, do it again. Do it again, do it again, okay? It's really important to do the timing of it. It's also important to understand your dog's going to fail, and that's okay. Dogs, just like humans, learn from failure. So if they don't get totally out of control and you're able to redirect them, like you saw Gabe did in that video, and bring them back, you saw how much better they did the second time. So it is important to let your dog fail sometimes and then go back into it, because they're going to be like, where's my hot dog? You don't get the hot dog now, So I use that leave it a lot for my distraction from the trigger to help them stay focused on me.
With the way, so I work a leave it too. My leave it is a little bit different. My leave it is, let's keep going, let's ignore it. So my leave it's always on the move, okay? It's, we're going and they see something they want. It could be trash on the sidewalk. It could be a squirrel. It could be, get up to the high chair stuff. It could be a dog or a person. And my leave it is, okay, we're going to keep going. So I'm never going to stop moving when I teach leave it. If the dog starts to veer off, I'm leave it, and we're going to keep going in that opposite direction. If you try to stand still and your dog's at the end of a leash and you're just yanking on that leash going, leave it, you're doing nothing.
Not doing anything.
The goal of my leave it is to ignore what's going on. You saw it, okay, life goes on, and we're going to keep moving. When we work leave it, because I really work it as a very specific command on its own. And so I'm always starting with really easy stuff, right? I want to set my dog up for success. I'm not going to start just working leave it when they see another dog on a walk. That's what I want to get to by the end. So I'm going to start with something that they can get. If they get to it, it's not going to kill them. It could be a treat. It could be, a piece of food that's not toxic. And I'm going to set that up on my driveway or inside my house, and I'm going to have a line of it. And I'm going to have my dog on my lead, and we're going to start walking, okay? And they're going to go to veer off to it, and I'm going to say, leave it. I'm going to give them a little bit of a leash tug, and I'm going to keep moving. I may need to pick up the pace, because if I start to slow down, it's going to be harder for me to get my dog back on my track. So I may have to leave it, and I'm going to start walking even faster. And then I'm going to start working that up to some of those higher distraction stuff. It could be I'm trying to simulate a squirrel. Every time my dog walks by a squirrel in a bush or something, it freaks out, and I'm trying to get past that. So now I'm going to try and simulate the squirrel in the bush, or I'm going to try and simulate my dog is always going after trash on the floor. And so I'm going to set up all these stations and we're going to work it there.
And I think that's a really important point. I'm not just going out there saying, leave it, leave it. There's back to that homework. There's some intense training. They know what leave it means before they go outside. But I specifically use it for the trigger of a dog. So no, don't go out there and be going, leave it, leave it, leave it, like we said. They have had that base training at home. You can go, there's lots and lots of ways to train leave it. YouTube can be your friend, guys. There's lots of great ways to train it. And these are great exercises that we do at the shelter, that we do with your clients. But yeah, again, no wrong way, no right way, just different ways.
And remember, you guys have to figure out what's going to fit your lifestyle the best.
Yep.
So how, what type of commands to break some of the reactivity are going to be easiest for me to handle. If I have, a 100-pound woman with a 150-pound dog, I'm going to give her different techniques to do
Absolutely.
than if I'm walking a little 10-pound dog. I can't treat those the same. And so there's a bunch of ways to do it and a bunch of ways to fit them around my client's lifestyle and what they're expecting out of their dog.
We're going to move on the doorway, but we will answer questions at the end, I promise. So obviously our second biggest reactivity is doorways, right?
So your doorway, your entrance to your house, your foyer, whatever you want to call it, is one of the top places where someone's going to get bit, okay? We have usually a tighter space. We have a space where a dog is going to run up to, and a lot of times that's when people see the reactivity.
The doorbell just stimulated the heck out of them, so they are on high alert. It might be stranger coming in. They might be fearful. They might be excited. There's a whole lot going on here at the front door.
Because you need to remember that most of the time when someone's coming to the door, you know who it is. You hear it, okay, I'm going to go let them in. Your dog, though, doesn't know that someone's supposed to be coming over. So when you're laying in bed at 10 o'clock at night and someone rings on that doorbell, you as a person are getting a little, I didn't know someone was supposed to be here. It's 10 o'clock at night. Why is someone ringing my doorbell? I'm going to get a little bit nervous. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. That's your dog all the time. So every time someone comes to the doorway, that's you in the middle of the night, and your Ring camera comes up, someone's approaching your door. That's your dog all the time.
So like he said, fear, territorial, and overexcitement, right? That's what's going on in their head. And what was that? Okay. So again, knowing what is my dog fearful of the person? Is my dog being protective? Are they being territorial? Is it just overexcitement? Again, kind of the three main reasons that your dog is. Again, we do handle this both similarly but differently. But one thing that we both do is we desensitize the sound a lot. So I stand there, listen, I can be this up. I do this in my class. I stand at this door like this with my hand out the doorway with the dog ringing the doorbell. All right. Okay. How obvious can I be that there's not a stranger at the door? I'm like this. Okay. They'll still react. The dogs are still going to react even when I look like this crazy person trying to get a doorbell to ring. You have to desensitize them to the sounds. They're always going to alert bark. They're doing their job, and that's okay. That's what we want. But then they need to be done. So when you take away a little bit of the excitement and desensitize and make that positive with the doorbell, I stand there with treats. And I'm like this. Ring, they don't bark, they get the treat. Ring, now I start adding time and adding time. You do a lot of YouTube sounds like we just did.
To start with is I was talking about before, if we have very specific sounds, we can start with that volume really, really low. And then it's like that threshold, but we're doing it with sounds. So now we can get so close to a trigger, okay, we can get so loud with a trigger. Okay, we're going to do that the same way, and we're going to start with really low, and then we're going to work our way up to when it's really, really loud in front of the dog. And so they're not as afraid that it's coming. We can also we can cue with the sound. So, if we're using the doorbell, we can use the doorbell, and every time the doorbell rings, we've added a nonverbal command on it. So the dog will go to, we can have the place command just based off the doorbell or the knock, and we don't have to say anything. Every time that doorbell rings, they go to their place, or they go to You have some dogs that just can't see the person that's coming in. They're okay with it as long as they don't see the person. So we cue with that doorbell or that knock for our dog to go run into downstairs or go run into our office where they no longer can see the person anymore. And they know that every time that doorbell rings, I'm going to go into my certain area and I'm going to get rewarded for it. So there's multiple different ways that we can handle the sound itself. Now, when we get past the sound itself is when we get into some of the territorial stuff and all that kind of thing.
And we're adding the, people to the door, but you have to decide, where am I going to send my dog? Am I going to train my dog place? Am I going to train my dog crate? Am I going to train my dog to a room? You have to decide, where's my controlled location for this dog going to be? I had extremely reactive dogs, so it took me a very long time to train them. And then, so when I got this dog that I have now, I just, every time I went to open the door, I threw a treat and I threw a treat. So every time I open the door, he runs that way. So I just don't want to have a runner. I don't. So you find out your ways to handle it the best way that you can, but you have to pick. You know your dog. Where's the most comfortable place for my dog? Some dogs need to be front and center because it is excitement. Some dogs need to be, okay, no, stranger danger, I need to be back here when they come in. I have to check them out, but that's all I want to do, right? So you have to find out what is best for your dog to make them comfortable in that scenario.
Yeah, and when people start coming in, is now we need to we have some more options. Some dogs, like we're saying, they need that space. And so whenever I'm going to a new client's house, even if I know their dog isn't doorway reactive, I'm still going to ask them to put the dog away, let me come in and get settled, and then we can bring the dog out when things are a little bit more calm. We're not letting our dogs meet people in that space where all the bites happen. We're gonna have our dogs meet people.
I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, let it happen. Let me see it all unfold. I don't want anybody leashed. I want the chaos to happen because I want to see it. So yeah, so you never know. But in doing the commands, again, you have to understand some dogs have to see and some dogs cannot see. That we're talking about people entering the doorway.
Some dogs need to just come up and sniff. They're, for whatever reason, they need to just sniff the person. They're freaking out. They could be right here to the person, but until you give them a chance to sniff, they're going to continue to freak out. So all our dogs are different. How they handle each of those situations are different. Some dogs, we work a pacifier. So it's because they can't control their emotions. And so that's when those big outbursts come. Okay. So I'm going to teach them to go and grab their toy. If your dog naturally grabs a toy to then bring to the front where people are coming in, well, we've already started the process of using that pacifier to control their emotions and not let it just burst out onto the people that are coming into our house. And then just how to handle, our dogs with the doorways in general. I personally don't let my dogs go within a barrier of my front door to avoid some of these issues. That way I can guarantee that they're not meeting someone in the wrong place. They're not going to run out of the door if I have to grab a package or bring the trash out. I know that they're not going to go past that barrier. And all that kind of obedience-based stuff is going to really help your dog with being able to handle what's going on around them. They know that, okay, if I can't get that close, I'm going to be back here. I'm going to feel safe because I have some techniques that I learned as a dog.
The other thing is some dogs have to meet people outside just because of the level of excitement. Listen, I've had my dog for 2 years. He still has to be leashed when people enter my house. Okay, so don't feel terrible. It happens, okay? 5 minutes, that leash can come off and he's fine. He just does not understand his body weight. I'm sure you all have. He will maul you. But if you can't expect your dog not to greet guests, if he can't sit at that front door and you can't open it and close it without your dog being calm, how is he going to accept a guest? If you can't say, sit, stay, and open the door and close the door, or they have someplace to go, or they know they're supposed to run the other direction, or what are they supposed to do? How in the world is a third party going to enter that doorway? So you have to figure out, how am I going to handle the open doors? I do threshold training, the first thing I actually do with my dogs. So my biggest accomplishment in dog training is I can unload my groceries with the door open. I find that huge because I do it immediately. I have children. My dogs are never allowed to cross the doorway of my kids' rooms. It makes them higher for the dogs. They're in command of the dogs because that's their space and the kids aren't allowed. They're not allowed in that kid's space. So I'm very big on that in my house, understanding that. So there's just so many different ways to train it, and you have to figure out what's best. But before you start to even add that person to the door, where am I going to put them? Can I open the door on a stay command? How are they just going to handle that without anybody there? Let's start there. Okay, and then we would start to add the third party in. Let's talk about the UPS man. Okay, sorry, Mr. UPS man. Again, we talked about it earlier, self-rewarding behavior. They run, Mr. UPS dropped off my package, and I barked, and he went back to his truck, and he left. And I did that all by myself. Okay, it's over and over and over and over again, no different than the person walking their dog. And I barked at them, and they left. Right? So it's such a self-rewarding behavior. It's a tough one. So one way that I deal with this one is I work a come recall on this immediately. Distance is very tough, especially when they're triggered. So the door might be here and I'm like, come, with that high value treat, and they'll come. And I start to add distance, and then I redirect them away from the door. It got to the point that I actually said, thank you. And because you don't want to be screaming at your dogs. You're on a conference call, you're like, shut up, right? So you don't want to do that. So it got to the point where I got them so good on the recall that I thanked them. I said, thank you, come. And they're like, what? Because they did their job, that somebody is in the bubble. They told me, but now it's over. I've got this. And now, thank you for coming. Here's your reward. Now let's go play. I call them fridge toys. I keep toys on top of the fridge that are rarities. If it's an elk antler, if it's a Kong in the freezer, and then that's what I gave them initially to keep them away from that door, to redirect them from going back to Mr. UPS man. Okay? You do it a little different too.
There's a few different ways that I'll do it. The sound desensitization with someone coming to the door, the UPS truck, because they're going to know that truck's coming before you even get there. That big truck, something I haven't hit on yet, is certain sounds are going to give off a vibration along with it. Okay, that's how they know that truck is there before it gets there. That big UPS truck, the garbage truck, the school bus, yeah. The loud motorcycle. Okay. These are setting off not just a sound, but a vibration through the ground that we can't notice. But the dog does, and that's why they know. So I'm going to work on some of these really loud noises before they get there. And so I will take a dog to the Amazon warehouse, the FedEx warehouse, and I will work with that dog as those trucks come in and out. So I get the sound of the truck itself. Okay. Then when I work the person actually coming to the door, my big one is if I can get that UPS guy, that delivery guy, to just do a 30-second treat toss to my dog, I can work my ready command, which is a command that I give to 9 out of 10 reactive or aggressive dogs that I come across, is I'm going to attach a command before I throw a treat. So I say that command, the dog perks up, they're ready to go, they know something good is going to happen. So whenever that UPS guy comes to the door, if I can have them, hey, toss this treat to my dog, before you toss it, just say ready. So you go ready and you toss the treat. You do this enough times, every time you say ready or anyone else says ready, your dog's going to perk up and see, what do you have for me? It's going to help with desensitization to strangers and people in general too, is because now they're thinking every time a person comes towards me, what do they have for me? Are you the hot dog guy? Are you the cheese guy? Are you the cookie guy? What do you got for me? And so they're ready to get something. They're paying attention. They're not barking because dogs can't multitask. So if they're doing a command, they're not going to be able to react at the same time. And that's why that basic obedience is so important. It's not just, oh, I can have my dog lay on the ground on a command, but I can use that in certain scenarios where the dog might be freaking out. If I can get them to focus on a command, they can't focus on that trigger. So I'm going to kind of break down stuff like the UPS guy, and I need to see, well, maybe it is the sound, and that's the part I have to work. Maybe it's the person coming to the door, and that's what I need to work. Maybe it's both, but I can't kind of treat them the same way. I kind of have to break it down.
And I think the most important thing is the end goal is to change their response. I mean, that's, our goals as trainers, probably your guys' goal here too, right? You want that dog to look at that trigger and then look at you and be like, happy dog, right? The goal is to change the response. That doesn't always happen. So, and that doesn't make anybody a failure. It doesn't make your dog a failure. Sometimes they will need one squeak, 3 leave-its, whatever it is, for the rest of their life, passing the guy dressed in all black with the baseball cap, because that's the trigger, okay? And that's okay, because you've been able to, you have it now under control, and now you know. So understand that it's not, none of this that we talked about today is clearly a quick fix, because we've been talking for an hour now. We're at an hour. And we could squirrel out all day and be here all night. But the end goal is to change your dog's response to the stimuli. And that's by using positive reinforcement and correction. And that's the end goal of what we're doing here and trying to help you guys understand.